Hi, it's very nice to be here tonight, and I'm very happy to be sharing some of the experiences that I had with you when I traveled to Pakistan. This was, I'd never been there before, and it was all new and very, very interesting to me. So I'll start with the first slide because I have lots, and if I'm moving quickly, you can ask me about it during Q&A. Okay, so this is quickie, just a map of Pakistan. You can see I made the square at Islamabad a little bigger because that's where we spent most of our time. And if you look down on your right, you'll see Lahore, where we spent today, and all the way down at the bottom on the Gulf is Karachi. So those are the cities, but the tribal lands where we really wanted to visit are the green area over on your left. And you can see it's a very small area. So this photo here on the left, Shahzad Akbar, is our mentor and our sponsor in Pakistan. And Shahzad runs an organization called the Foundation for Fundamental Rights, which is helping the people from the tribal lands who've had lost family members and to the drone attacks by helping them construct lawsuits and criminal cases. And they have a number of lawsuits outstanding for the loss of life. They're suing the CIA director at the time, Jonathan Banks, and they're and also the lawyer for the CIA. And they are also pursuing a criminal case in the international court. On the right, you will see me in the middle, and on the left is Leah Bolger. And the two young ladies are two of Shahzad's three assistants. They're both lawyers. And they really were so helpful and supportive while we were there. I just want to commend them. So here we are. We visited with a group when I was first there, the Pakistani branch of WILF, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, right. And PODA, I'm not sure what it stands for, but I know what they do, which is they assist rural women. They actually created a Rural Women's Declaration of Rights, and they actually called a convention of women from these rural areas and had them actually design their own declaration. So I think that's kind of an interesting project. When I was first there, I arrived about 5 days ahead of the rest of the group with a couple other people. So we had some interesting conversations with a very small group of us there. And down on the right is just showing our group with some of the women from WILF, and you can see it's a small group. One of the interesting things about this group is that Samina, the woman on the left, or on your left in the top picture, apparently there's a lot of people in that group who have some ambivalence about whether or not the drone strikes are okay, and they didn't want to offend us, so they didn't make a big fuss about it. But it was known that that's the case, and they were asking us for our arguments about why we thought the drones were more of a counterproductive than productive. And the day we went up to Waziristan, Samina showed up to see us off at the bus, and she asked us to send back pictures for her. And she was very, very supportive. So they were really interested in hearing back from us about what's really going on, because even Pakistanis don't get to go up into these areas. These are some more people we met. The MLN, one of the big, the Muslim League, one of the big political parties in Pakistan, their information minister met with us in his home. And at the bottom is a wonderful filmmaker, Samar Minala. She's an anthropologist, and I have some of her films if anyone would like to see them. They're basically, she interviewed women in the tribal land. She got permission to talk to these women who are sequestered, and her films are really very interesting about things like the effect of war on women and, you know, how these women get by after their homes have been ruined and they've been driven out of their countries and so on. Very, very excellent documentaries. Okay, so the Institute of Strategic Studies invited us to come for a discussion. They wanted Ann Wright to sit on a panel. But what I like about this picture, the topic is drones as a threat to U.S. national security. So I thought that was really an interesting perspective since we were having this discussion in Pakistan. After that, we went to the Capitol Law School. I mean, we were really invited into a lot of different spaces to talk about the drones and the damage they do and the amount of damage they do to the American reputation, the U.S.'s reputation in Pakistan, and that they're a violation of the sovereignty of the country, and they invite the destruction of boundaries. So if we can violate the sovereignty of one country with our drones, then surely they can do it to each other and perhaps even to us. So here we're at the Capitol Law School, and in this case the topic is dissent, voices of conscience. And we had a group of law students who were participating in this panel discussion, and at the front you can see on the left is Mariam Hossein, who is one of Shahzad's assistants, the one not in the previous picture, and on the right is Toby Blomé, who is an activist who's been arrested like half a dozen times in different drone protests around the country. She's based on the West Coast, so most of her work has been on the West Coast. So the next day we went to the military college, and by then Medea had joined us, and we had another panel discussion, and afterwards we had a huge schmooze fest. And everyone wanted their picture taken with us and came up and talked to us. And on the left is a general in the Pakistani army, and on the right is a young man who's who's in the Peace Studies department of the military university, which I think is very interesting. They have a Peace Studies department at the military university, and a large number of the students who came to our discussion were from that department. So after that, we went to the Institute of Policy Studies for a discussion of basically, this is a conservative think tank, and I thought it was very interesting because they are strongly opposed to the drones. And I didn't bring my article because I have 1 minute per slide, but I guess I want to say that everyone, in maybe a dozen different people, spoke out against the drones, and not only that, but with ideas for how to stop the drones. Should we shoot them down? What should we say to the Americans? How can we make it clear to them that we don't want these attacks on in our country? And there was a whole long list, and at the end of this presentation, I'm going to show a slide with my website address on it, and I hope you'll go there, and I have an article where I listed out a lot of the details. But you can see here that on the left, you'll see that there were some people who were very, very conservative there. And there were also people that looked very modern, and they were really into this conversation. It was really, really important to them. Also, you might notice there's a little boy, and he was brought out. They have a bunch of orphans from the wars living on the campus of, I think it's a Muslim university in Islamabad. And these children are actually like living in a hostel there, and I imagine they're being, educated and looked after. And the little boy here was a sweet boy soprano who sang the verses of the chapter of the Quran, I think on Miriam, but I'm not sure. Something like that. And so he sang just lovely, very similar to what you might hear in a Catholic church if you were there on the right day, and it was 20 years ago. So here we are. In one afternoon, we met with Ambassador Hoagland, and then after that, I'm sorry, Joe. I want to apologize. Joe had just come in at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and he had not slept. So that excuses his demeanor. But next to him, the reason I picked this picture is because on one side of him is Dr. Fawzia Siddiqui, who is Afia Siddiqui's sister. Joe's going to talk about her later. And on the other side of him is Altaf Shakur, who is on the board of their organization that's attempting to have Afia released from a terrible prison sentence in the United States and returned to Pakistan so she can be near her family and her children. But as I say, Joe's going to tell you the whole story. But they came in, and it's very interesting because there was a woman, they're fairly conservative, from a conservative party in Karachi. And there was a woman that had already been asked to speak, and her name was Tahira Muhammad, I think. I know I got the Tahira right, the Muhammad. At any rate, she is a liberal and progressive, and she had been to some of our other presentations at the think tanks, and she had been invited to speak, but when she saw that Fawzia was there, she deferred to Fawzia and said that she would come back another day. So I thought that was really, tells you something about the sort of cross currents on the issues between conservative and more left-leaning people and parties in Pakistan, because on certain issues, that there are certain issues that transcend the right-left scenario as we normally think of it. And they just become human issues and public issues. Okay, so one of the things that happened when I was in Pakistan that really impressed me is that we went to visit with the victims of drone attacks, but in fact, there are hundreds of thousands of victims of the United States War on Terror in Pakistan, and not just from drone attacks. And in this picture, I show a few. Now, on the right are some children killed in drone attacks, but at the top on the left, Joe and I went to a press conference and a rally for people whose loved ones, fathers, sons, husbands, have been disappeared during the Musharraf regime, in relation somehow to the war on terror. And these people's loved ones were never returned to them, and they never found out what happened to them. And most of them were like basic middle-class people, their husbands. The woman who called it, I think her husband was a lawyer, and she's the lady in the blue and green with the white headscarf. It's just horrific when you think about it. And just to bring the message home, we met that evening with some men. You can see them at the bottom. Most of them, their sons, were picked up somewhere along the Afghan border and imprisoned at Bagram without charges. And those men, those boys, are still in Bagram to this day. Some of them have been there 10 years. Some of them have been there only 5. They are getting them out. What would happen is the boy would disappear, like maybe a 15, 16-year-old boy, and 2 years later the family would get a note from the Red Cross saying, oh, by the way, your son is in Bagram. So then they would contact them and try and find out what to do about it. And they would find out that there's this big rigmarole, sort of hamster wheel they have to run on to try and get their loved one out of there. Because if someone charges you with something, then you can have the option of proving your innocence. But if there's no charges against you, basically what you have to do is prove you're a good person and you might never hurt anyone. And that's much harder to do than just proving you're innocent of a particular crime. So one of the stories, I'll just relate the one that stands out for me. Yeah, the man on the left who's facing to the side, that's his son. They moved to Karachi from the tribal lands because the violence was a problem and the father wanted the family to be safe. So they moved, and once they were settled in Karachi, summer vacation came and the boy didn't need to be at work. So the father, or didn't need to be at school, I mean. So the father sent him and his good buddy, another 16-year-old boy, back to their home in the tribal lands to gather the rest of their possessions and bring them back to Karachi. And that's the last he ever saw of his son. And the other boy said that one day his son went out and he just never came back, and that he waited for him and he looked for him, and finally he just came home alone and told this horrible story. He had to tell this horrible story to his friend's parents. So 2 years later, they found out he was in Bagram, and he has been there ever since, and I think he's the one that's been there nearly 10 years. This is a map. Now we'll get on to the drone strikes. This is a map, it's about a year or two old now, of drone strikes in North Waziristan in Pakistan. Imagine if you lived there. I'm going to, in a minute, show you the size of the actual area, because, of course, this is a big map. It could be anything. It could be a big space, little space. Basically, in this map on your left, I'm always doing mirror sides, is the town of Miranshah, which is the county seat for North Waziristan. And on the right is another town called Mir Ali. And you'll see that one of the victims we met lives in the vicinity of Mir Ali, but there you can see how many strikes were there. It's continuous. And this is since 2004 and probably going up to 2010 or 11, early 11, because I pulled this a while ago and they have a new map out now. And this isn't all the strikes. This is just the deep cluster. There's obviously ones around it. So these are the men who came to meet with us. And can I pick this up? Yeah. So if you look on the top, it's Shahbaz Khan on the left and Malik Jalal Khan in the middle, and someone from the Dower tribe whose full name is not jumping into my head right now, and Shahzad is behind them. And Shahbaz Khan's brother, two of his brothers, were killed in a strike, drone strike that happened in March of 2011. 2 Hellfire missiles were launched into the middle of a town meeting where the elders were meeting to decide a land dispute in the community. And Shahbaz Khan's older brother is a Malik, therefore an elder, so he was present. And often the elders take the young men with them to these town meetings so they can learn how it's done, basically, so that they can become mature members of society when they grow up. So he took his younger brother with him too, so that he could just experience it. And of course, neither of them ever returned. And Malik Jalal came with him to help him tell the story, because these people are very shy. It's very hard for them to speak to strangers and foreigners. And the Maliks are in general more educated. They usually speak some English. They're the big landowners in the region and the people who have access to more resources. So Malik Jalal and the other Malik are there to support him. Although, from my observation, basically the Dower Malik was driving for Malik Jalal. So maybe there's a pecking order there too. But this was a tragic story, and the people below him, the 2 men on the left, also had a younger brother who went with the same person, actually with Malik Julabar, who was the other guy's brother above him. And he was a 19-year-old boy. And he too went along. He was having a day off from school, and so Malik Julabar said, hey, come on along. This is going to be a really interesting meeting. There's some major property discussions going on, and I think you'll learn from it. And when they saw the strike in the distance, they saw the flash of the Hellfire missiles striking. They, okay, thank you. They ran up there and found nothing but body parts and rubble. On his right is a man named Noor Baram, who has taken a lot of pictures. And the guy on the far right is Kareem Khan, whose brother and young son were sitting having tea in his house one day while he was at work when a Hellfire missile leveled it. And Kareem Khan is suing the CIA for $500 million, which I think is just wonderful. Okay, here's a map, and I guess the only thing on there that you don't know is Dada Keel, where it says up on the upper left, that's where Imran Khan's house was when it was attacked. No, actually, that's where the Malik's meeting was, where the town meeting was. Okay, so these are the people greeting us along the way, on our way up to Waziristan, and on the right is just the people living their lives. In case you wonder what their lives are like in this land of many terrorists, there you have it. And when we got to the compound, it was night, it was dark, we were mobbed with young men. It was quite disconcerting at first, but it turned out to be benevolent. They fed us well. If you look in the lower right-hand corner there, you can see what a beautiful area it is. This is the central area, the compound. Compound means home. And the man on the right above is one of our hosts. There were 3 brothers and their families live in this compound, and he's the middle brother. He says he's less political than the others, but as it turns out, he was the one who did most of the work to make us comfortable, and he did a great job. And here is a final image before I show you a brief video. And this is these are pictures with our security people at the top. Men carrying guns who happen to be on your side. And the ones on the right, their t-shirts say "No fear," which I thought was pretty funny. So American t-shirts you usually associate with football. And this guy on the left was guarding our compound where we spent the night. And then more townspeople. That's their life. And so I think that's it. You can ask me later, because I don't think I have time to show the film and let you look at this. So I'm going to go down and quick show my 2-minute film. There. What did I do? Oh, hold on. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, good. 2 minutes, folks, and then that'll be it.
We do this thing. Before this, we have this media thing. So, I mean, you've been there when no one has got us involved. So, you've already great history. Thank you very much. You don't understand what a big impact it's had.